because they've been interactive. And so this is kind of how I'd love to make this. You know, I thought about a very structured kind of approach, and then I thought about one where we get a chance to talk to each other, because I kind of miss you guys. And when you're out doing the kinds of things that we do, you kind of feel like you're by yourself. And peer-to-peer helps me connect with you guys. So hopefully that's okay with you. If that's okay with you, that's how I like to approach it.
Sounds good.
Go for it.
Good. So let me tell you just kind of as a quick update. I took the note that we sent out, sort of focused on three things. It said that I'd be talking about the global crisis, resiliency, and growth. And I took those three pieces apart: the crisis, our resiliency as research parks, and growth. And I thought if we look at it that way and we have a dialogue around that, that would be absolutely fantastic. Because I think there are actually three pieces of the whole, and I'd love to get your feedback and thought and discussions around it. But to get everybody level set, one of the things I wanted to do is give you kind of an overview of this whole Tech Center Research Park and what's happening here in Virginia, if you will, and get you guys to get everybody level set, if that's okay. And for that, I am going to do the unthinkable and show a few pictures, only because they're updated. If I can make my Zoom work as well.
You start showing slides, Jeff, and I'm out.
Oh man, I got to show just like one or two a picture. How about that?
Okay, no, I do want to see pictures, actually.
I want an Excel sheet.
I'm really out.
Oh, so it can rotate. Really quick. And if I go too fast, just stop me, everybody, if you have any questions. But real quick, let me click here. Okay, so some of you may have seen this, and many may or may not know. I see some people on here that might not know kind of where we are. But when you think about the state of Virginia, you know, when Joe was here, we talked a lot about Blacksburg, and now that we have our new leader, Brett Malone, with us as well, I'll talk to you a little bit about the resiliency part and the growth part as well, about what we're doing here, and get your feedback and what you guys think as well. And then you know the Arlington, Alexandria kind of piece. I'll show you some pictures of that, only because we've got pictures back now that I don't know how public. I guess they're public, but to you guys, I'll show them to you anyway. And then just really kind of walk you through what's happening here on the eastern side of the state, all in the context of the fact that we have, you know, this global crisis that Brian talks about. So here goes. So to level set everybody, the eastern side of Virginia, I know that Vicki, you're out here out west and others, but the eastern side of Virginia, I did a blow up of it. So you'll see with this little arrow in Newport News, this is kind of where our research park is, right here, just a little bit east of Williamsburg. So level set everybody. And of course, there are a number of different things that are going on here, but I wanted to make sure geographically you knew. Our park itself is 100 acres in total. It, of course, is mixed use. There are three pieces to it. We're putting about $450 million into it. It is, and this was important for all of us on here, this is primarily developer-led in terms of financing. So when we talk about resiliency and growth, I wanted you to make sure you understood kind of where we were as opposed to where we are in Blacksburg. Okay. All right. Our developers, I put that in there, but you can see it's the same kind of thing you have. Took a couple drone shots of the place itself so you can see what's going on. It's anchored by Whole Foods. One of the reasons why I really wanted to break it into pieces and frame it under crisis and resilience and growth is because this is the retail side. And I'd be interested to hear how retail is being affected in each of your parks and how you're adjusting to that, because we definitely had an impact on retail. This was 288,000 square feet, which was 97% full at the time. Anchored by Whole Foods, they have no problem in terms of resiliency, so they're all good. So that if anybody was wondering about them, they're good. On the apartment side, we have 288 units here. You know, with all of the when you think about the crisis and kind of what's happening to us there, everybody was kind of really concerned about rent and being able to pay rent, if you will. It remains full and they continue to be okay. The support that came out was helpful. So we haven't really seen significant impact there as well. The research park, remind everybody, is 10 buildings. We finished building 1 and I'm en route to building 2. This is what the master plan kind of looks like. For most of you, it's right around the Jefferson Lab. So you can see we got 10 buildings, and I'll talk to you about the impact of kind of what's happening in resiliency and growth on that. This is an interesting story. I highlighted this company, ITA, because when I think about the resiliency and growth, I'd love to get your thoughts on our value proposition. So the value proposition of each one of our plants and what we're saying to our tenants and how we're helping them and how we're reshaping what kind of value we have in the midst of this crisis. This is one company that we spend a lot of time. I've worked with them very closely on the growth side, which I'll talk about as we go forward. Diversity was, of course, I learned that from a lot of you guys. We have everything from data analytics to co-working to cybersecurity to medical devices. This one was interesting. I wanted to show it to you. You maybe haven't seen that, but we did a lot of individual offices. And in this whole thing of COVID and the impact on resiliency, we wanted to highlight individual offices, as you can see, still in a co-working environment, but with individual offices as opposed to shared desks. That picture. Not going to do that. Building 2 now is supposed to start here in September. We pushed it back to the beginning of the year, of course, impacted by COVID, but we're still planning to move forward on this. And I'll talk about that in terms of resilience and why. This is a view you may or may not have seen. We've completed the whole campus view of where we're going with this thing. On the right is building 2 that we're starting here in January. And the road for this is actually going in now. So we're putting in the infrastructure. This was important because we felt that we had to, as part of our value proposition in around resiliency and growth, is add some growth services. And these are strategic growth services, everything from strategy, working with companies directly. So it was kind of interesting. We felt we had to talk about our value proposition when we think about growth and why we exist. And I can tell you one of the focuses for us is retaining our current tenants and helping them grow. So get your thoughts on that. Finally, as we connect the dots, you guys see what's happening in Northern Virginia. I think I showed you this. This is by Reagan National Airport, a rendering of what it would look like in the space. This is brand new. So this is the new building that's actually going in, the first Virginia Tech building that's going in up in Northern Virginia. So that's it.
Set a timer for 40 minutes.
What's that?
40 minutes, starting now.
Oh, that wasn't me. Any questions on that before we dive in?
Hey, Jeff, what relationship do you have with Jefferson Labs, and are the tenants in your park contractors for Jefferson Labs? And tell us a little bit. I mean, I know about Jefferson Labs, but I don't know if everybody knows about them.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Brian. So we are adjacent to the Jefferson National Lab. The Jefferson National Lab is one of 17 DOE facilities. Let's see. Yeah, it's one of 17 DOE facilities, and it's focused on basic science. But one of the things I wanted to show you is this one. I'll blow it back up because it matters. The U.S., of course, was going for its own electron-ion collider. Many of you may know that or may not have known that. And it came down to New York and here at Jefferson Lab, which Brian's talking about. It was double the size of Amazon. For those who are wondering in terms of scope, it is double the size of Amazon in terms of its economic piece and what's associated with it. And we are adjacent to it. So I'm showing you I'm showing you if I can get this I'm showing you actually the footprint to Brian's question here. If you can see it now. I don't know if you guys are able to see this. And you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, this is the footprint for the ion collider. It's 25 feet below ground. And that's where we smash atoms together to identify the beginning of origin of man. And so there's one in Geneva, Switzerland. Some of you caught that.
Oh, yeah.
One in Geneva, Switzerland. And so we are working with Jefferson Lab to commercialize innovation coming out of there into our research park. That's what actually is happening. Our conversation, Brian, today was about just that. Just being able to get technology out of there into there. One of the areas of focus, for example, is nuclear medicine. And one of the technologies coming out of there is imaging cancer cells in women with dense breasts. And so they have a camera that's associated with that, can't be picked up on MRI and those kinds of things. So that kind of technology is technology that will come out and be here. Any other questions?
That's a good thing to have in your backyard right there. Well planned.
Yeah, it was a lot of thought. I mean, but it's basic science. So when we think about our value proposition and what we do in our research parks, and I look to Allison and others, you know, I think Allison, I might have talked to you about what you're doing down in Huntsville, right? We get a lot of basic science. And so part of us looking at the growth side and impact of COVID is how can we better deliver value to our tenants, and that's one of the things that we're focused on doing. What else?
Jeff, can you go back to the slide that showed all of your, the developer and sponsors and the architectural firm, and are they the ones taking the lease up risk on, you know, building the next phase of the next facility?
Yes.
Or is Virginia Tech? Virginia Tech?
These guys are taking the lease up risk, and I'm helping them lease it up and diversify it.
And that's are they a local Commonwealth of Virginia company, or?
They're based in Virginia and Maryland. They're actually big. They're not as big as a J.B. Smith out of D.C. For those of you who know, they're huge, but
right.
They're a really, really big company. So they're taking the lease up risk around building 2. So building 1 is 98% full. I don't know if I mentioned that. And we're filling building 2 right now. And I've already got that to probably could be 40, could be 60% full.
And Jeff, are you doing long-term ground leases with the developers, or is it a fee simple land sale? How does that structure work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, let me tell you what happened. The developer with our work actually purchased the land and actually assembled it. So also owns the land as well, Emily. And we're developing that on that land as well. And William and Mary, for those of you who know as well, William and Mary is a bit involved in it, but it is owned by the developer.
That entire master planned area is owned by them?
Yes.
Okay.
So there was a massive land assembly piece, and many of you might have heard me say we had to work on identifying who actually owned it. So Emily, we had no idea who owned the land.
Hmm.
And it went back to, seriously, it went back to William and Mary. And we were, and we were reading handwritten leases. I mean, handwritten deeds. And we had a long, those of you who know about this, we had a long, some strong efforts trying to figure out who actually owned it. And then the key was to buy it all.
Mhm.
Hey, Jeff,
Thank
I
you.
know you've
Hey,
been
Laura.
working on
Hey,
nice.
Laura.
I miss you.
I
It's
miss you too.
you were talking about the lease up.
Me giving all y'all hugs.
All of you. You were talking about the lease up activity, which you've done great at. Are you getting any percentage rent with that goes back to Virginia Tech or your operations, or is it just part of the agreement with the developer?
No, that's the revenue model, everybody. The revenue model is I do get a percentage of it. To help me do this, since it's really, otherwise I'd have to build a whole, one of the things when we think about resiliency, I keep going back to my notes about resiliency and growth, was taking on a partner, Laura, in this case, CBRE or Colliers, national partner with me to help me actually lease this up, and I'm splitting with them. There's no way I could do it by myself, and I need more boots on the ground and that kind of thing.
A percent of commission, a commission split versus a percentage of gross rental income or something like that.
A percentage of the commission split.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. Thanks.
Jeff, I think
Go
for
ahead.
only those leases that you are bringing to the table. I mean, is your developer also doing their own leasing?
Yeah, so the deal we struck was, I mean, this is good for all of us on here. I wanted one team. I didn't want us to have, I wanted one team with one objective. And so everything we catch and kill, we split. And yeah, there's a chance that you get laggards on the team, but I'd rather be able to manage that than I would trying to, that was my deal versus your deal. We don't do it. And as a matter of fact, I can tell you guys how we're working it out. I'm really, really strong on the front end and the very back end, and they execute around commercial real estate, Laura. And I mean the nitty gritty, which those of you who know me drives me nuts, right? And so I'm okay with working with the CEO of the company, but when we get to the real estate department and they start talking about details that drive me crazy, it drives my hair gray. This was black when you all saw me before. It's a little sprinkles of salt and pepper in it now.
But Jeff, are you managing ongoing relationships though with the companies?
I am.
You are. You do have. Yeah. Great.
I am, and that'll go to the resilience. So remember, 3 parts when we started: crisis, resiliency, and growth. Right. So I broke them into 3 pieces, and so that's where the value prop for all of us who are AURP and everything I'm learning from you, and I'm sending out crazy questions, and thank you all for getting back to me on those, by the way, or asking you dumb questions when we're together, it's because we're trying to really craft and strengthen our value proposition to those, Leah, to strengthen those relationships beyond a real estate transaction. That's where we win.
And
Sure.
Jeff, to that end, I think a lot of us are working on keeping these relationships resilient and keeping the retention rates at this time. Will you get the same deal with CBRE of split commissions on renewals so that there's a continued? That's good.
Absolutely, because look, if people are renewing, it's because we did something right. You know, they didn't quit us, you know, and for that, I think we should share in it. So we got to give them a hug. But more than anything else, it is sustainable, profitable growth. So when we talk about sustainable, profitable growth to our tenants, we're speaking their language. We're not talking about $1 per square foot. We're saying, what customers and suppliers can we introduce you to? What access to technology can we provide? What access to capital can we network you into, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're talking the same language, and now it's out of real estate's hand, if that makes any sense. So it's going to this whole idea of resiliency and growth in the face of COVID, you know?
So Jeff, near one of your neighbors is the National Aerospace Institute that I know the University of Maryland, at least at one point, participated. I think NC State participated in, and William and Mary and Virginia Tech. Are you close to that, or is that's adjacent to the NASA facility down in that neck of the woods?
I am. So to the point of resiliency and growth, right? So I keep coming back to it, and I'm going to keep coming back to it, because in the face of COVID, I'd love for us to talk about this. The value prop that you hear me talking about with Jefferson Lab, we're also executing with NASA, which is less than 9 miles away. So, so the same story around that. What can we do to help them accelerate the commercialization of innovation from those labs into the marketplace and into my park? And then what kind of services and products can we put around them to help them be successful and help them tell a story so that they get better funding, if that makes any sense.
We would love to partner with your major developer and some of your other partners, Jeff. So let us know how AURP can help, bring together those kinds of resilient partnerships you've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, let's put our heads together. And I think we started this as an association in Tempe. If you remember, Leah, we had a conversation around our value prop. Remember that? We started to really hit that hard. I think that's COVID now is forcing us all to look at that now. I don't know if any of you got stories around that you can share with the group on how how COVID has caused you to rethink your value prop. I'd love for you to share that and for us to have a discussion around that. Who would want to lead off on that?
Well, I've been away from some of y'all in these calls for a while, but this is certainly on our minds too. We had been selling a physical community and the connections between the companies, and with 90% working remotely, we're having interesting sales calls now that kind of question, do I need a physical space if I get all the same things if I work remotely? Can't you just provide the service package without us having to have the physical space? Which is, I think, a good part of a testimonial on the value that we provide through events and connections and company relationships. The worry is I need them to rent the space too, or I don't have a research park.
Yeah.
Well, so Laura, this is good. Everybody else chime in on this as well. So the question is revenue models, right? So you need them to rent the space, right? So you can generate the rental revenues, et cetera, et cetera. Any of those other pieces, have you been able to tie revenue models to them to help along the way?
Well, the revenue that,
Curious on Leah, the same thing. If you provide an awful lot of programming, are you feeling this shift of if people are remote, can they still get your programming and resources?
yeah, gosh. So, I mean, I guess the one thing that I would mention that it's a little bit different about my office is that we are a university-wide broad partnership office. And so we are working to create partnerships with companies, even if they're not co-located on Centennial campus. And we made that pivot, I don't know, Keisha, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. And that means, that may mean, and it already has, not so much specific to COVID, but I expect that it may come, companies coming on and off of Centennial campus, or leaders of companies coming on and off of Centennial campus. And we've had some boomerang companies, for instance. And so, yeah, I mean, we've been spending a lot of time, not so much on, like the social programming that we've done before, but more around how can we share our thought leadership within the university with the executives of our companies. And so we've had executive forums of our partnership leaders with the chancellor, for instance, to just talk nitty gritty. What is the university doing? How are we changing? How is that? How is everything affecting your businesses? And we've tried to keep those in smaller groups. And I think that everybody has really appreciated that and appreciated the opportunity to be able to ask our chancellor questions directly. And then, yeah, I mean, it's just a continual and more so communication than we would normally be doing. And yeah, I mean, there's the big question: what does that mean? One of our best partners that, I mean, we use as a case study all of the time. Keisha and I just learned yesterday that they inquired about getting out of their lease early.
Well,
so it's sort of like, okay, yeah, they're all working remote. None of them are in their office or in their lab, and they are, at least for right now, operating independent of the research units that they have enjoyed being so close to on campus. And I'm not talking about researchers who are just in their office. I'm talking about, I'm talking about machinery that they need to be close to do prototyping and the like. And so, of course, that's a concern. And so, does that look like a transition? How much do we help our partners in that transition? Do we allow them to take a small office for right now while they can get beyond these challenges, hoping that they'll get back to that larger footprint so that we can keep those partnerships going? That's not a very popular financial decision, but that we may get to some of those things. So yeah, I'm just kind of sharing this, just a little bit thoughts that are going through our minds. But when we did a survey that we just released the results of last week, and asking our companies to think about what kind of occupancy are they going to have going into September and then potentially beyond, and we're talking about 10%.
Wow.
10%
Wow.
of their normal numbers.
Wow. So that's what makes this peer-to-peer amazing. So I see so many heads nodding because you are not alone, Leah, and you hit on a number of different things. And there's a couple I want to highlight and get everybody else to jump in. And I know that Jeff, I think you, Simon, I think you have a question. I'm going to definitely come back to your question, so remember it when I do. But Leah, one of the things you said was providing access to thought leadership. So what I'm taking notes on is on strengthening our value proposition based on the best practices I'm learning from you guys. So that's my notes in this call from you. So access to thought leadership. So many of you knew my own personal background was from corporate and from reading P&Ls coming from that side of the world. So it was not real estate. So I was learning everything about real estate from all of you, right? Now, the conversation is shifted into what I consider my lane and/or wheelhouse, where I'm very comfortable. So when you talk about thought leadership and providing that access, they're asking different questions. One is, yes, how's the university reacting to it, blah, blah, blah. But what we're really getting on our side is, what can you do to help me profitably grow my business? That's what they're really saying. And when I start having that conversation with them, they want to have lunch with me. Now I want to find out you and all of you who can help with those kind of, I want to connect them with people, and then they see value with me, and then our conversation starts to take a different angle. Anybody else experience that? I mean, that was just one part of what you talked about, Leah. But there's so much to talk about. I want to give everybody else a chance.
Yeah,
I
Jim
can
Curry.
jump.
Whoops.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Two things real quick. One is just this whole conversation that ties into a session that I'm helping put together for the conference. So I want people to think about, I may solicit some of you, because it's basically the capstone is going to be basically just charges to breakout groups to talk about just what are you doing? How does the real estate affect? What is the effect of the pandemic, and how do we go forward? So there'll be an opportunity for this in the conference. I just wanted to mention that. But as I say, in the meanwhile, as we trying to think about how to structure that, I may reach out to some of you guys if you don't mind for ideas on that. Now that said, coming back to this idea of value proposition, we're new here, so this is small and much more of a diffuse innovation district than a park, in that it's kind of going to be scattered over areas of land and not just all contiguous. But that's a long way of saying we only have one building so far. But in this case, each of them, I mean, it's about 100,000 square feet, have done a good job of bringing in corporate partners. The focus has really been on kind of existing corporate innovation centers, however the company wants to define that. But it's also been based very much on what you were just saying, Jeff, is how do we help drive your growth and profitability? The space is a ticket to that. It's kind of a question that, down the road is how do you supplement for the space? Right now, the only people participating that we're working with in that regard, unlike what Leah's, I've always liked Leah's model, but so far our partnering has been limited to those who are tenants. So now what we're explaining with, though of course with only one building, none of them have a huge stake. If somebody had 100,000 square foot here, I think it'd be a different question than only having 10 or 15. And also being new. But we have a partnership group, and we've been working heavy on technology to kind of develop what we're calling Tech Connects, and trying to answer that question. So we put together a few roundtables with the partners. And the interesting thing is they're seeing more of each other in these Tech Connects, because they're all basically, collective teams or Zoom meetings. They're actually usually teams, where they're seeing each other and have this kind of exchange that sometimes even when we put them all in the same buildings, as much as you try, you don't talk to each other. So we're trying to drive value that way and asking them, one of the things that Tech Connects have been is allowed some of the companies to showcase technologies, and we're able to invite students in. And so they've been using it for recruiting. But either way, these are just some of the examples of trying to figure out, okay, how do you drive it? Today, the revenue model is the real estate in order to participate in that. Do any of those become valuable enough that they supplement for the real estate? I don't know. And I certainly don't have an answer once the scale goes beyond, like you're talking about a 10 or 100,000 square feet who may not have people in it.
I think we're going to, first of all, Jim, that's great. I think we're going to have to, as
This
an
the video
association.
they were showing us is an hour long.
Huh? Oh, sorry. I think we're going to have to think beyond our real estate footprints. I think we all are going to have to. I mean, think about what Leah just said. She says, I wrote down, even if not on campus.
Well, it actually brings us back.
Wow.
I mean, it's a heck of a question, because doesn't it bring it
I'm
back
not
to
trying to throw the whole thing under the bus, but believe me that we didn't want to get everything sidetracked off of what you're doing, Jeff.
No, go ahead.
No, but it does create it's that fundamental question, and in a way it's what AUP and our members have struggled with. Are we real estate, or are we purpose or mission driven? And they are sometimes at odds. So today, what's the role of the real estate, and how do you serve the purpose with or without that real estate? While you were saying, Jeff, revenue model. What's the revenue model? The real estate has been the revenue model. Can you serve the purpose if the real estate isn't your only revenue model?
Any other thoughts?
So almost all of the programming that we run is open to the community. Probably 90% of it, is people on our campus that participate. But we've always thought that building the ecosystem will pay dividends for us. And, it's kind of like, planting a tree, right? And so I think that's important for us. And I think on the broader question, I really have two things that I've been talking to companies about. One is, you can work from home, but how are you going to interact with the students? And that's a really big issue, right? So almost all of our companies, if it's not the primary reason, it's definitely a very close second. They're here for the talent pipeline, right? I think all of you would have that. And so if they're not here, how do they access that talent pipeline in a meaningful way? And then number two, most of the companies that we have on our campus, they're bought into developing their corporate culture. And when they left in March, they could all pretty much keep that corporate culture to some degree until they started onboarding new employees. And onboarding new employees remotely is a huge challenge for our companies. And so, we've been talking to our companies, really about those two things. And, maybe at least for a while, we're going to have maybe not as much growth. Companies may grow, but they're going to be probably more hoteling and things on campus. But really, to get those new employees acquainted with their co-employees and assimilated into the culture is really difficult remotely.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Laura from the University of Illinois Research Park. Yes, there are two of us.
Yes, there are two of you.
But a lot of what we've been doing is that we've always known that a big part of our secret sauce was the peer relationships between our companies. And this has just accelerated that as being a big part of the value. Before the pandemic, we maybe specifically had meetings of our corporate site leads, every other month, maybe once a month, depending on what was happening. We've been doing it every week since March without fail. And the attendance is outstanding. They bring in other people from the company when relevant. And back to the point of whoever was talking about bringing in your university leadership, we have been now scheduling routine visits. So we have a whole list of guest speakers that will be coming into the site lead meetings of basically showing off why Illinois. Illinois is a leader in X, Y, and Z. So we have everybody from deans, department heads, institute leaders that are relevant to our companies coming to talk with them. Number one, it makes our companies feel special. Number two, it gives them a unique insight into what is happening that they might just read about in a news story, but maybe it makes them sticky because they see the opportunity to engage with these. These are all very corporate friendly operations that are wanting to engage with the corporations in meaningful ways. To Dan's point about talent, that's the name of the game for us too. And in fact, tonight we have our virtual open house for students. We have 340 students registered, 15 companies. So we're putting them all in Zoom rooms. It's a big experiment. We'll see how it goes. But that's the move. And so the students are still the carrot for a lot of our companies, and they want to, we are now trying to very creatively figure out ways to engage them together.
Wow, that's great work that you guys are doing as usual. One of the things you said I thought was interesting is the difference between attraction and retention. Tell me about efforts, how those efforts, so Dan, I heard you talk about what you're doing with companies and talking about onboarding new employees, et cetera, et cetera. What about the distinction between attracting new companies to it and retaining the ones you got? Tell me that balance, and how are you balancing that in the face of what we see?
Well, I actually think our company recruitment is going better than pre-pandemic. We're getting a lot of touches from companies. What's great is it's really easy to schedule Zoom calls with companies right now because everybody's working from home, everybody's bored. We've been doing a lot of Israeli and Canadian companies. We've been talking with them, people that want to enter markets. We've got one, we've got a Swiss company, I think in a day or two and things. And so, it's kind of setting the stage. And so we're doing that. And then our faculty are also more available. So then the second Zoom call is we're able to engage faculty, with them. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing on the new company recruitment. And to date, we haven't had any leases cancel or anything. Our biggest issue is nobody wants to pay their parking charges. So.
I think you mentioned that before. I think that's universal no matter where you are.
Dan, how do you feel about the conversion? One of my issues is we're getting a lot of calls. I'm spending a lot of time pitching, but they're not signing because I feel like unless they physically walk the space, which nobody gets travel approved, it's really hard to do that actual conversion to close the deal.
So we've had only 2 kind of modest leases out of this, I guess. But what I would say is we're getting quite a few joint research testing projects and things with the university. And so, you know, it's a long-term play, right? But if you get them here, we have programs in Nebraska that cost share on university research, but they have to be physically located. They have to have boots on the ground. And that's been a big carrot in getting them here. And then once they're here, it's easier to try to grow that relationship. So, but the conversion is hard. The Israeli companies, we actually need to get some faculty to Israel before we can move farther down the road with a couple of them. And that isn't going to happen for a while.
I can tell you, are you all, thanks for that. Are you all, when we think about the companies, are you also experiencing collectively, I mean, each of you, I'm seeing, first of all, I have access to a CBRE report on the impact of commercial real estate that I'll share when I put my hand on it they gave me. One of the things they're seeing nationally is the call for shorter term leases. Are you all hearing and seeing that as well? And talk to me about that if you are, and flexibility around those leases.
I think that was happening before COVID.
A real trend toward shorter term, 1 and 2 year leases? Because that's kind of what we're seeing here. We're asking when it's time, they're saying, okay, yeah, I'd like to sign a 1 or 2 year lease versus a 5 year or 10 year lease. And we're seeing a lot of that these days. And CBRE called that out as well. So I imagine you are as well.
What are the expectations for tenant improvement allowances or something affiliated with such a short lease?
Yeah, Allison, you hit it right on the nose. So we have had to adjust what we would offer in terms of TIs associated with those. And that's been a point of negotiation. You know, I know you want a shorter term lease. How are we going to pay off the investment in improving the space, et cetera, et cetera. And that's been pretty interesting for us as a way of trying to get them to commit either to longer or to take on more responsibilities of the TIs associated. That's kind of what we're seeing as well.
I guess another question, Jeff, is how do you get them out if you've got somebody long-term waiting in the wings to take their spot?
Yeah, it is. In our case, you build new buildings if you could afford to do that. And since we are growing, we have been able to put people in, you know, we're trying to pre-lease buildings, of course, as you might imagine, George. So that is a challenge, and we don't have the solution for the existing ones, but for new ones, we can offer them space, et cetera, and new ones.
This has been an interesting conversation, and I kept thinking about one of the pre-conference sessions that we had last time at AURP, and I guess Cameron asked us to draw, you know, the research park of the future. So look 20 years in the future, and I forget how many different groups there was. There was a handful. And one of the observations was at the end of it, only one of the groups had drawn buildings on their paper. So everybody was focused on the programming side of it.
You know, we've now hit that hard in this conversation. And what I would say it's both and. So I think it may have been Jim that talked about that whole piece. It's how do we augment? So if you're running a big giant business and you got a core business that's going away, that's running, it's kind of hanging in there, threat. You all know we now have this something else, diversification, if you will, associated with it, that we're trying to grow. At the same time, we're trying to protect the core business, which is really funding the growth for the other thing. But strategically, we have to do it, and that's essentially what we're trying to do, is figure out additional models. I'll tell you one of the things we did on the consulting side. I think maybe it was you, Leah, but you talked about access to thought leadership. We talk about this thing called strategic business growth services, which are beyond, amenities and that kind of thing. But this is management. I'm going to use it, actionable management consulting. Okay. So we have a company we're working with. We were able to build a relationship to get them to this this point. And part of it was around their growth, both organic as well as through acquisition. And we've had some success there. And now we're starting to get known as people who can help companies grow. And that's kind of what we wanted. And oh my goodness, so if I can build a team of folks to help me do more of that while we're trying to get the footprint for our leases, I think that can help us become more robust through the cycles. I don't know if that makes any sense or any thoughts.
And is that a structured, more contractual mechanism that you have, or is it informal?
Well, it started informal. So the good news about what I learned from all of you, relationship really matters. And you all are doing it in your parts, right? So it started off informally, Leah. And then in building that relationship, here's the anatomy of it. Informal relationships based on everything you guys have taught me. And then he says, well, I've been struggling with ... The moment I get that, then there's a problem identified, right? And then I'm saying, who do I know that can help solve this problem? And whether I get it or not, Leah, whether it was for me. Okay, but if it's something we can help them with, we say, okay, well, what if we help you with that? Now, at first, we didn't really ask for anything because they were in the park, and right, we were getting the lease rent. Yeah. But then, when we talk about strategic growth, he would hire a Bain, a BCG, or Booz Allen, or the old Arthur Anderson. I don't remember their name is now, but there are those of us who have those experiences who know how to do that kind of work. And so we just did it for him. And now he announced yesterday he gets a $50 million contract, and then he just now bought. He's en route to $200 million. So for us, we're trying to tell a story about the jobs we create, the economic development, et cetera. And now we've got a testimony around a company who's telling other companies who now should come to the tech center because they'll help you. And I know Laura's kind of cringing at my marketing, but they'll just help you. That's kind of what we're thinking around the growth side. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's kind of what's happened so far.
Well, ours is certainly more informal, but we have, probably one or two that is more formal and baked into the master research agreement that we have with a company. But we have toyed with this idea because here's this thing, right? They can hire one of those consulting firms and they're still not going to get access to the kind of expertise that our faculty have. Still, I mean, it doesn't matter if they have 50 consultants on their project, they're not going to have access to that same kind of expertise. And the network that our faculty have, which is completely different than what any of those consultants would have. And so we've toyed with this, and I know that other, I want to say maybe Ohio State has a model where they create small consulting groups basically for companies. And, the faculty get a little consulting agreement. There's no intellectual property that's created out of this, but there are models out there, and like I say, I think we have a couple that are baked into our agreements, but we haven't scaled any of that. It certainly would be outside of the resources that we have at this time to deploy, but man, the opportunity is there.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I wanted to tee up here because look, COVID is causing us to think differently, right? I mean, things that you're toying with. So we have the consulting group at VT. So it's the CGVT. So it comes out of our Pamplin School of Business. But all of these students, for example, are actually going to work for Anderson and Booz Allen and BCG and Bain, right? But we're able to, through a relationship, Leah, so I'm able to offer CGVT services to companies. They're able to do it as a project, if you will, and they are able to get experience, and then they can say they help company A. We're trying to do more to actually promote that for them. Now, they can only take on so many projects, but this is something we can scale. And so we're using that as a little model to start to, again, add value to it. So imagine me going and talking to them about why they should be at the tech center and say, oh, by the way, we know that you're an early stage or a second stage kind of company with 25 people in it, and you need to grow to 50, and you need some work around product design and development or competitive positioning, right? And we can carve out something like that for these kinds of groups, Leah. That's a value add. And so our thought process is how can we add additional value in the face of COVID, and COVID's now, and we're not going to assume COVID's going away. We would say, assume it's here to stay, and how do we build value if it's here to stay? If it goes away, we're even better. But right now, that's kind of the approach we're taking.
Jeff, is that for students only, or do you have faculty involved, or is it just students, business students?
So the CGVT piece is business students that are faculty led.
Right.
But
see, one thing I think we're missing, and this used to frustrate me when I was at the University of Maryland. If you think about faculty practice plans at medical schools, so faculty, they work and they do consulting, medical consulting through their university, and it's million dollar enterprise. Faculty at most universities, they consult with industry. Universities say, go ahead, make sure it doesn't involve us, because otherwise it would be a conflict of interest. And I've always thought, well, how come universities don't organize their faculty as a, more like a faculty practice plan for medical side, and get a piece of, and provide indemnification, train the faculty how to consult and do it through the university. Purdue they started this. I don't know how successful they've been, but it just seems to me that's a missing piece of our corporate university relations enterprise, that right now there's every incentive for the faculty not to have anything to do with the university, and we give them 1 day a week typically. And I find it odd that no one has quite, in England it is done through the university, but here in the US not. Anyway.
Interesting, Brian. We've had for a while what we call our faculty experts and residents. We hire them through the Research Park LLC because it fixes some issues inside the university.
Yeah, there's workarounds, like that's brilliant, yeah.
We have a data science expert in residence and a user designer in residence who's an industrial design faculty member, and somebody who was doing work on supply chain, because I needed these faculty to be nice, friendly faces that would help companies when they wanted to understand something like learning, but they weren't going to do sponsored research. Many of these companies, they just wanted somebody to help them understand the technology. And so being able to pay them by the hour and keep them on retainer has been one way to work around that.
So Brian asked a question earlier that some of you may have picked up, and I thought it was kind of cool in the last minute. He said, how are you working with Jefferson Lab and those kinds of guys? I tell you, the conversation I just had is what turned my hair white, by the way. It was with a federal lab, and they tried to accelerate the technology out, right? So I had a company on the other side interested in the technology, and they were going to land in my park, so life was lovely, right? So here's the problem. This particular agency, and I don't know if you guys experienced this, and I know Madison, you're in Huntsville, so here we go. The agency says, okay, I can provide, here you can have the technology. So what company is going to go into the technology and say, hey, just give it to me off the shelf. I'll just buy it, give you a licensing agreement, and go do my thing and see you later. Well, they need the principal investigator support, Laura. So they need some, so if you just buy the thing, they say, well, we'll give you 8 hours of support. And here's what they told me. They said, I'll give you 8 hours of support at the beginning only. So I'm thinking, wait a minute. So I go to the Apple store, I buy an Apple Watch. They say, hey, you got support, technical support for the first 3 hours. You know, buy the watch. I don't even know what questions to ask, right? And then I get home and 3 days later, I'm thinking, how do you get it to read my heart? Well, I can't ask it because my technology, you know, time ran out, whatever. So I was just having that discussion today, Laura, around that. And it is a huge opportunity between what you're saying and what Brian's saying. I think that we could really that we could really add value with. And so here's how I do it. I've tried to build relationship with faculty, like, what would you call it? Grounds, you know, from the bottom up, you know, not top down. Just kind of like, hey, Emily, how you doing? It's great. You're the greatest scientist in the world. What do you think about helping? You know, it's the most inefficient way to do these kinds of things, but it's to getting to Brian's point, because I couldn't do it top down. You had to build a network of relationships to get it
grassroots.
done.
I think you're saying grassroots. Grassroots.
That's what I was looking for, Brian. Thank you.
And I'll reiterate on that, Jeff, that they're always telling us to go to these full professors for that help, but they're not the ones that the companies really want access to. They want the assistant or the associate professor that's still really closer to new technology. And those people we can pay at an hourly rate and interest them in different ways than the full professors that otherwise the department heads would tell us to work with.
Well, there's also a tendency of there's certain faculty members, especially full professors, have a tendency to not exactly have a customer-focused attitude.
Yeah, and we picked those out because you may know that sometimes you want to put customers in front of certain faculties and certain customers you don't want to put in front of certain faculty. Every one of us know that. So,
hey, Jeff, we're getting close to the hour. And so Simon had a question. Did you want to post that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I was just interested. You were talking about the tenants or the units available in the expanded tech park. I'm wondering, was there any sort of preference given to faculty or staff or people associated with the tech park, or was it just open to the public? And was it just open to the general public?
So I can start with that, Simon. I originally started with just opening up. I may have to tighten it up later, but I tried to open it up and then just tell people about it. I didn't make it a condition, if I understood your question right. I didn't make it a condition of being in the park. I just wanted to be able to talk about what we do and have people say, oh, that's a huge value, and then have it as a way to attract people to the park.
All right, well, Jeff, I think we're right at the bewitching hour here. So you have any final thoughts before we kind of wrap up?
Well, my final thoughts are, this is an engaging conversation. Hopefully you found it worthwhile. I wanted to break it apart and frame it in three areas. And that was, you know, really around the crisis itself, and then focus the conversation around adding value in the face of the crisis, around resiliency and growth, and the share exchanges around what we could possibly do. I appreciate you all taking the time to do it. Don't stop. You're doing great things. And if you have great ideas, please, please, please share them, because we're all focused on how we, you know, move this forward. So thank you for taking the time out. Brian, thank you for setting up this peer-to-peer, and thank you all for listening.
Thanks to Diane and Vicki. So I want to, before we close out, just a reminder. So on September 10th, if you're a member of APLU, you're interested at 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, Dan, myself, Julie, and Jonathan Bates from Utah are going to be doing something for APLU about how research parks and green technology. That's September 10th. September 15th, we have our conference on bio and pharma manufacturing. If you have any tenants or any part of your university that's involved with the renaissance of bio and pharma manufacturing, please sign up for that. Again, that starts at, I think, 1 o'clock, but Diana and Vicki will be sending out information about that. On October 15th, again in the afternoon, our own Leah Burton is going to be leading a session on research parks and corporate relations. And it's an exciting new webinar. We have the head of the National Association of Colleges and Employers. We have a representative from NACRO, the National Association of Corporate Relations Officers. We have a representative from the National Association of Research Development Officers. Those are the folks that work in your sponsor programs offices. And we're going to talk holistically about the role of place-based corporate relations at universities through their research park and some of the topics we discussed here. And then of course we have our annual conference, November 2nd to the 6th. Again, we're looking for sponsors. We're looking for people to sign up for that. Registration is now open. We'll send you all reminders about that. And feel free to ask myself or Vicki or Diane about any questions you have. And when's our next peer-to-peer? I know September 15th is the biopharma manufacturing. I think the 16th, if we're sticking with our every other week, that would be the next one, correct?
Yes, it's going to be Wednesday, September 16th. And then next week we have our communicator check-in. It'll be next Thursday, September 10th at noon Eastern time.
Okay, so sign up. Thank you all. We'll send out reminders for all these exciting events coming up and greatly appreciate it. Peer-to-peer came back from summer vacation, Jeff, and you did a stand-up job for peer-to-peer was rested after the summer vacation and you
Sorry I messed up the schedule last